Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Sorry about that. Getting started a little late. But basically, we are, what's today? Today is the 4th of August. It is also that's what I was doing. And then I realized I didn't have sound. Where is my calendar? There it is. And it is the 16th of Av, according to the calendar. Now, last week was Shabbat Nachamu. One of the other sources I use for the dating of the Torah portion said this week is Shabbat Nachamu. Because we're out in what's called the diaspora, out in the scattering of the nations, the reckoning of the Torah portions, the reckoning of the holidays is slightly different than in Israel. So I think one of my reckonings I use based on Israel. The other reckoning I use based on on the outside of Israel calendar, and sometimes they don't exactly match up. Either way, we are definitely in the season of comfort. This is the time where God wants to comfort Israel, patch them up and mend them up. Our Torah portions, the Haftorah portions, the portions from the prophets, for the next 6 or 7 weeks, depending on where you're at, are all about comfort. And then we go into Teshuvah, into repentance, with the coming of Elul and the entering into the time of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So, basically, where are we? We are 343, 215. Okay. Wait a minute. Okay, anyways. Fine. I got two different numbers going on. I just got to figure out, this one's close enough. So, basically, I'm not in coat and tie, or shirt and tie today, slacks and tie. We had a mikvah at our elder's house, so I changed into something a little more comfortable, stand out in the sun outside a pool, and play some music while people were being immersed. So, and we will talk about that at a later time, but that's why I'm kind of back into my I'm on a trip type outfit. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with some prayer, and then we'll get into the Torah portion. Father, I thank you for today. I thank you that you have given us these times and these seasons. I thank you that you have given us comfort, Father, so that we can know your comfort and not just be rejoicing in you all the time or feel sad all the time, but we know that you comfort us and that you send us your season so that we can experience what you're experiencing when you experience it. Father, I ask that you open up the scripture. I ask that you open up the teaching for each and every one of us so that we get out of it what we need. And Father, I ask that this basic teaching grow into a fruitful harvest of 30, 60, and 100-fold. In Yeshua's name. Amen. All right. So, here we are. Today is Devarim 441 through 533. Again, we are taking a portion of each Torah portion every week. Some years are doubled, like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago we discussed Matot Maseh, and we kind of crossed over two different ones. And The reason being is that in those 3 years, the two Torah portions are actually combined. So it kind of worked out that we just cover all 3 at the same time. And then if we have any open areas, we can cover stuff that we haven't covered before. Today we're talking about Va'et Kanan, and I pleaded. The Torah portion actually starts with chapter 3, verse 23, and goes through chapter, where's my book? There's my book. 7, verse 11. So, depending on what synagogue you're in, this Torah portion also contains the 10 Commandments and the Shema. Last year, we didn't talk about either. This year, we'll talk about the 10 Commandments. Next week, or the 10 words. Next year, we'll talk about the Shema. And let me get my weapon. I've got like 5 different weapons, so I keep misplacing them. Hold on for just a second. So, while I'm reaching for my book here, I will continue to talk. And what we will discuss, some of the things that we're going to look at, of course, are what happens in Va'et Kanan. Now, as our review, as we always review, the first thing we talked about, actually not Moses entering the land, but the words that make up Va'et Kanan. You actually have, it's actually 3 words, 2 prefixes, and then the word itself. The 2 prefixes, va, which is the vet, stands for and. It may sometimes stand for but most of the time, 99% of the time, it stands for and. It's a conjunction. And the other word is et. And we've discussed et before, Aleph Tav. It is a pointer to picture the Messiah. And Hanan, number 2603 in the Strong's, to mean, it's a verb to be gracious, show favor, or pity. Basically, Moses is saying, pity me, Lord, I want to go in the land. And God said, you messed up, you can't go in. So, that was how the Torah portion started. And I pleaded for the Lord to let me go in. And he said, because of what you did with the rock, and actually in this portion he says, because you guys, and he says it, this is the second time he said it, because of you guys, you Israelites, I can't go in the land. It's all your fault. Well, he's the one that struck the rock. He should have spoke to the rock, but he didn't. So, it's kind of he was angry at the people because they were rebelling again. It's been 38 years and they still can't get it right. I know some people who know that feeling. Me being one of them. Listening to the statutes. So, judgments. If you do that, you will live and possess the land. And this is also where he says, don't add or take away, which is repeated in both Proverbs and the book of Revelation. The people responded that they heard and fear. They heard and saw voices. This in Shemot, where it talks about the giving of the 10 words, it says they saw kolot, voices. They saw the voices. They didn't just hear them, they saw them. Don't know how that happens, but I think the easiest way I can think of to imagine it, because I really don't know how it works, but when you're watching video of a plane passing the sonic barrier, the speed of sound, you can see the ripples of the sound waves. And it says it sounded like his voice sounded like thunder. So somehow when God spoke, they could not only understand the words, but they can see them coming at them, and it scared the bejesus out of them. It also talks about getting the 10 words, which we will repeat here in a few minutes. A third warning to follow the mitzvot. And with that, he says, God, your God is a jealous God. His name is Kana. We looked at that word, and 15 or 20 times it says God is a jealous God. He calls himself jealous. It's the same word used in portion Pinchas, talking about Pinchas's zeal for the Lord. That word zeal is the same word as jealous, kana in Hebrew. Speaking of same words, it is really bothering me, and I think I need to write a letter, but a friend of mine sent me an email a couple of days ago, and it was some guy teaching about Hebrew words. And he was teaching about the what Paul wrote, Rabbi Shaul wrote about, what is it? Splicing in, grafting in the olive branch. In English, the word is scion. Scion. S-C-I-O-N. And he's, without going into a lot of detail, he basically said, and this goes back to listening to the statutes and not adding or taking away. He said that the word Sion came from the word Zion, the Hebrew word Zion. Not even close. If you hear that teaching out there and you hear it, hear somebody say that, it gets propagated. Like all bad doctrine, it gets propagated. That's what happened after the Messiah died. All this bad theology started going out there, and nobody kept true to what the scriptures say. So this guy basically, in about a 30-second time period, he went from teaching about that the word Sion, the word Sion, meant grafted in, or like a grafted in branch. It doesn't. It means mountain. It means a lifted up thing, a banner, a desert mountain, and it's talking specifically. It's only used. That word is only used in Hebrew. Even the meaning portions of it is really only used talking about Mount Zion. So God uses that word very specifically, and he twisted the meaning of it. So, adding and taking away, that bothers me when that happens. When I hear that, it bothers me. There's another guy out there talking about the festivals, and what he's doing is great. But he takes made-up doctrine, throws a little Hebrew on it, and it sounds terrific, but he's teaching false doctrine. And it bothers me, and I think that's the apostle in me, that it bothers me that there's this false doctrine running around that it's just so blatantly obvious. Anybody who has a basic understanding of Hebrew can look it up and say, this guy's full of it. And yet he's out there asking money to teach this false doctrine, and people eat it up because they don't take time to read the scriptures. So, and this leads into the prophecy of the latter days. It talks about God will be compassionate and faithful. God will drive them out to the nations, and then he will bring Israel back. And the last thing we talked about is Av the Comforter. This month of Av is called Av the Comforter. 7 passages from Isaiah. Isaiah 41 through 26, Isaiah 54, 11 through 55, 5, 54, 1 through 10, 61, 10 through 63, 9, 49, 14 through 51, 3, 51, 12 through 52, 51, 12 through 52, 12, and 61 through 22 are all read during these next 7 weeks. And every single one of them talks about Israel being comforted. So that, okay, this is a time of comfort. Based on rabbinic teaching. Now this is based on rabbinic teaching, I admit. But I was talking to somebody else today about this. A lot of the rabbinic teaching was started prior to the Messiah, and this comfort thing does not go against the Torah. In fact, if you go back and look at this time period in history, this is when the prophets were, the dating of the months, this is when the prophets were talking about comfort. So, though it's a rabbinic tradition, it's backed up in Scripture. The same thing with the fasts of the 9th of Av and the 17th of Tammuz. They are rabbinic tradition that is backed up by scriptural reference, calling them, saying they will go from days of fasting to days of joy. So God says, okay, yeah, I didn't set that up in Leviticus 23. The rabbis set that up after the destruction of the temple in the first temple. But because I know this is coming in 70 AD, I'm going to allow it. And he has the prophet prophesy about that fast day becoming a day of joy and celebration. So Av the Comforter is the same thing. We're in the 5th month of the year. So between now and the 7th month of the Hebrew month is when you see prophets talking about comforting Israel. And so basically we can say, yes, it's a rabbinic tradition, but we can also say it's scripturally backed up as a allowable rabbinic tradition. Where other things that, like Yeshua talked about washing of hands, was a rabbinic tradition based off Torah, but it had become something that was much more than God ever intended it to be. So he's like, look, you know, you're taking the basics and putting the cart before the horse. You know, let's deal with the heart first. Then we'll deal with washing of hands and other stuff later. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Devarim 4, Deuteronomy 4:41. Basically, this is just going to finish off the chapter of Deuteronomy. All right, 41 to 49. Then Moses set apart 3 cities across the Yarden to the east, that a manslayer might flee there, who unintentionally slew his neighbor without having hatred toward him in the past. And by fleeing to one of these cities he might live. Betzer in the wilderness on the plateau for the Reubenites, and Ramoth in Gilead for the Gadites, Gadi, and Golan in Bashan for the Manasseh. Now this is the Torah which Moshe set before the sons of Israel. These are the testimonies and the statutes, the ordinances which Moshe spoke to the sons of Israel when they came out from Egypt. Across the Yarden, in the valley opposite Beit Peor, in the land of Sihon, king of the Amorri, who lived at Heshbon, whom Moshe and his sons and the sons of Israel defeated when they came out from Egypt. And they took possession of his land and the land of Og and of Bashan, the 2 kings of the Amorri who were across the Yarden to the east. From Aror, which is on the edge of the valley of Arnon, even as far as Mount Sion, this is not Sion, it's Sion, it's a different word. That is Hermon, with all the Arabah across the Yarden to the east, even as far as the sea of the Arabah, at the foot of the slopes of Pisgah. All right, so here we go. 3 cities. Remember, God set up 6 cities of refuge. So when God set up the cities of refuge, the plan was for everybody to go into Israel. Well, God said, okay, you know what? These 3 tribes, their heart is right. They're going to help people out. Just a second. They're going to help their brothers out. So we'll give them this land east of the Yarden. Now, God's plan all along was to give Israel the land as far as the Euphrates. But he doesn't always reveal everything right up front. And sometimes he does and nobody ever pays attention. So we've got Betzer, which means gold or fortify. That was given to the tribe of Reuven. Ramoth means heights. This may be where we get the English word remote, meaning a faraway place. I doubt it, but it's a possibility. It sounds the same, but it means heights. It was up on a hill, I believe. And then Golan was given to Manasseh. And that means their captivity. Such a picture of Israel. Fortifications, heights, they get high up, lifted up, and they go into captivity. So these are the 3 cities of refuge. These are, and it says that a manslayer might flee there who unintentionally killed his neighbor. And we're going to look at that word here in a few minutes, but I just want to point that out, where he killed his neighbor unintentionally. In America, this would be called manslaughter. He committed manslaughter. He didn't intentionally kill the person, but the person died. He was working on his roof. The hammer fell off the roof, hit the guy in the head. It was a 5-pound sledge. It hit him so hard it caved in his skull, and the guy died. Okay, did he intend to do that? No. The man happened to be walking under the eave of the roof, didn't see him working up on the roof. The other guy didn't see it. The guy working on the roof didn't see him walking around. So the hammer fell out of his hand or slid down the roof or whatever, hit this guy on the head. No intention of harm, but his family wants retribution. So he has a place to go for this. And he goes to one of these 3 cities, or one of the 3 cities on the other side, and we haven't talked about those. We won't talk about those until the end of Deuteronomy, I believe. Now, to continue on, this is verses 44 and 45. We keep coming across these words. Vazot HaTorah. This is the Torah. And then it goes on. And these are the Hokim, Vaya Hokim, Vaya Mishpatim. The testimonies and the statutes, or the ordinances, the judgments that we were talking about again. These words always come up. Torah literally means instruction. Torah means instruction. Hok, inscribed boundary, and mishpat are judgments. Anybody who says God doesn't want us to judge people, they need to go back and read the Hebrew. The word judgment, to judge, judge is there many, many times more than it says lo mishpat, don't judge, or do not judge. All right, so now we talk about, and then he comes in and he goes, This is all the stuff that came out of Israel across the Jordan Valley opposite Beth Peor in the land of Sihon, king of the Amori, who lived at Heshbon. So, and we're going to get into this a little bit more here in the next chapter, where God sees, basically, if we remember back last week when we talked about Deuteronomy chapter 1, he said, this journey should have taken 11 days to go from Kiryat Arba, which is down on the southern border of Israel, to where they're at now. Should have taken them 11 days. Took them 38 years because they had been hanging around Mount Sinai for 2 years getting the Torah, right? So then God says, okay, you've gotten the Torah, I've given you everything you've got, now you just kind of have to fill in the spaces, literally. The rabbis say that when Moshe got the Torah, he got the complete Torah. From Genesis chapter 1 to Devarim chapter 32. See? 32 or 36? 33, 34. Devarim chapter 34. But there were no spaces between the words. So as God showed Moshe how each thing happened and what each word was, he wrote in the spaces up until the time of his death. This hid his death from him. He knew he was about to die. He knew they were getting ready to go in the land. God said he couldn't go in the land, so he knew he was getting ready to die. But the whole thing around his death was hidden from him. And it was left for Yehoshua to fill in those last few spaces. So basically what this is saying to me, and I'm not saying this is doctrine, but what God saw was that 38 years in the wandering in the wilderness was half a second in time to God. And he still saw the people wandering around the desert as that people he gave his Torah to. And I'm going to prove it to you here in a minute. But this is, personal belief. He saw them as the same people. And he saw that 40 years in the desert as if it hadn't happened. He recorded it for our benefit, as it says in the Brit Hadashah, in several places. Their wanderings were for our benefit, so that we would not repeat their mistakes. We're still repeating their mistakes, by the way, but that's what it's in the scripture for, so we don't repeat their mistake. We see how well that worked. Sometimes we got to say, God, were you really thinking this through when you did this? Did you really think this through all the way? The answer is yes, but sometimes us humans, we got to say, were you really thinking about this, God, when you figured this out? So let's go ahead and continue on. Oh, I got some sun, so I'm a little warm today, and I'm a little thirsty. All right, so Moshe summoned all Israel and said to them, Shema Israel, the statutes and the ordinances for which I am speaking today, in your hearing, that you may learn them and observe them carefully. The Lord your God made a covenant with us at Horeb. The Lord did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, with all those of us alive here today. The Lord spoke to you face to face at the mountain from the midst of the fire. I was standing between the Lord and you at that time, to declare to you the word of the Lord. For you were afraid because of the fire and did not go up to the mountain, and did not go up to the mountain, he said. All right, so then we get into verse 6, but we'll stop there. All right, so Shema Israel. We're going to see that next year, next in chapter 6. Greatest anthem of the Israeli people, Shema Israel and the Mourner's Kaddish, which is a profession of life and resurrection. So it says here, God made a covenant. This is not the Abrahamic covenant. This is the Sinai covenant. This is the betrothal that God talks about throughout the scriptures, where he betrothed Israel. It says, all those alive today, uses the word today. The Lord did not make this covenant with our fathers, but with us, all those of us alive here today. Now remember, these guys have been, since they got the Torah, they wandered around for 38 years. In that 38-year time period, all the men of fighting age were destroyed. 40 years worth. That means 2 generations of fighters have already grown up since that period. Some were born before Sinai, some were born after. But Moses says, and God says through Moses, all of us were alive today. What the rabbis looked at that and said was this: every single person who's called by God's name over the entire plan of God, everybody who will be called by his name, whether now, in the past, or in the future, were standing at Mount Sinai on that day. That means I was there. My wife was there. You were there if you are a believer. Basically my whole congregation right now, because it's a congregation of believers, all of them were there. We were standing at the mountain of God, listening to the 10 words, being called to follow God's mitzvot. And that's what the rabbis say, not the believers. The believers look at this and say, whatever. You know, yeah, they were all alive there that day. But in reality, maybe only half the people who were in this list from prior were actually alive at Mount Sinai. Everybody else hadn't been born yet, because there's a 40-year gap, a 38-year gap. Anybody who was less than 38 years old in the army of Israel at this time was not physically there, but God saw them as being there. So, according to the word. So that means that the rabbis saw that and said, not just them there, but basically all the believers throughout the generation, those who are called by his name. And there's Jews out there who are not called by God's name. They are Jews in name only. But they don't follow what God has called them to do, and they don't believe in what God called them to believe in. And they do not live according to the ways God set up for them. So they're not called by God's name. But everybody who was standing there at the mountain. And he says, we saw face to face. It's translated face to face. But this is actually the only place this actually occurs. Panim bafanim is what it says literally in Hebrew. Normally, what it says is, there's like 3 other verses that say something else, but out of the 15 verses, most of them say panim el panim, face to face. Same meanings, 2 different ways to say it. That bet is a picture of the house. So, to me, what it talks about, and I did not research this, I probably should have, but I was stuck on something with the 10 words. That it was when we were there, he talked to our souls were there, our spirits were there, standing. And so he saw us in our houses. He saw all the people, not in their tents, but in their houses, their spiritual houses. God saw us in our house because of that bet. It wasn't panim el panim, which, by the way, infers the name of God. El is the first two letters of Elohim, gods, or God. Bet is the first letter of the word house, beit. A beit is a house, and the three walls signify a house in picture form. So that's where the beit gets its name. A house gets its name from the picture of the bet. So that's what this is talking about. He saw us in our fleshly houses, but standing as if we're in the kingdom in our spiritual houses, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then Moshe stood between the mountains and the people. All right, continue on. Anochi Adonai Elohechem. Where am I? Yep. Elohecha Asher Haratzetcha. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, or any likeness of what is in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, and on the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing loving kindness to thousands, to those who love me and keep my mitzvot. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. Observe the Shabbat, to keep it holy, as the Lord your God charged you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you or your sons, or your daughter, or your male servants, or your female servants, or your ox, or your donkey, or any of your cattle, or the sojourner who stays with you, so that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there by a mighty hand, and by an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God charged you to observe the Shabbat. Honor your father and mother, as the Lord your God has charged you, that your days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with you on the land, which the Lord your God gives you. All right, Anochi. I read it. Anochi Adonai. I am the Lord your God. This is the first commandment, the first mitzvot, the first word God spoke to Israel on Mount Sinai. Most Gentile churches go to the next scripture, or the next line. You shall have no other gods before me, as being number one. That's not number one. Number one is, I am the Lord your God. These are all the places that phrase, Anochi Adonai, is used. There's like 250 times where the word Ani Adonai is used. But this is Anochi. And I was going to see if I could find it real quick. Turn on some more light. Let's see. Mem Noon. Mem. Noon. Aleph, Noon, Chaf, right? Where is it? Anochi, yeah, Chaf. Aleph, Noon, Kaf, Yod, I. I, the Lord. I, the Lord. It actually doesn't say what it is. And if you look it up in any of the other commentaries, it doesn't exist. This word does not exist in Strong's or Jacinius because it's a conjunction. It's like va'et. They'll give you the word Hanan, but they won't tell you what va'et means. Anochi. I usually translate I am the Lord. In my understanding, it's more of an imperative. I am the Lord. I am the Lord. Not I'm the Lord, but I am the Lord. I am the one who did this. I am the one who set you free. I am the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Anochi Adonai. And I'm not saying I'm the Lord. No. I'm just saying that's how the word should be read. Anochi Adonai. Where ani can be, yeah, I'm the one. I did it. I'm kind of not as emphatic. At least to me, that's what the word means to me. I need to do more research. I'll talk to my Hebrew teacher next week about it. But the difference between ani and anochi. So, and hopefully I'll have a more definitive answer for you next week. Where am I? You shall not make an idol. All right, I'm not even going to go into that one. We're not just talking about physical idols now. Sports heroes, actors, all these people that we idolize. I like watching TV programs. If I miss the program, I miss the program. If I get to watch it, great. If I don't get to watch it, I'm not going to get excited. One of my favorite actors is Gary Sinise. Not because I idolize him, but because as a veteran, he does a lot of work with veterans organizations, and he spends more time with his Lieutenant Dan band from Forrest Gump out entertaining the troops and providing relief for the troops, which is important to me as a former troop, than any of the other actors I know of. There's a couple out there that probably as much, if not maybe a little bit more, but he is one of the more outspoken ones and the ones you see out in the limelight. And he has no fear saying, I stand up for everything the troops do. And their job is tough, and we need to give them a break. So I don't idolize him, but I like watching his shows because now I'm helping him out because he agrees. And the same thing with shopping and stuff. Glenn Beck had something about, we shouldn't stop going to a store just because they don't agree with our things. It's like, yeah, but you shouldn't go to a store if they don't agree with your principles, because if your principles say don't kill and they're supporting abortion, then aren't you supporting abortion too? And it comes up with that a sin of omission where you didn't physically do it, but you supported the person that did do it. Like, how is that any better than the person that actually did it? You knew they were doing it, and you supported them. So I try not to support those organizations that go against what the Torah says, because to me it's supporting what they do. It's giving them allowance to do what they want to do. Now, do not take the name of the Lord in vain. This is one of my favorite ones because everybody says, oh, don't say GD. That's taking the name of the Lord in vain. No, it's not. That's cursing. It's not polite, but it is not sinning. It's just putting two words together. One of them happens to be the word God. And it's considered a vulgarity. It is not taking the name of the Lord in vain. This is what's taking the name of the Lord in vain. Matthew 5:33. Anybody who's a quick study of Scripture will know that what we are talking about here in this chapter is oaths. Again, you have heard that the ancients were told, you shall not make false vows, but shall fulfill your vows to the Lord. But I say to you, make no oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black, but let your statement be yes, yes, or no, no. And anything beyond these is of evil. And then he has to repeat himself in chapter 23. Um, 16. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple, that is nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the temple, he is obligated. You fools and blind men, which is more important, the gold or the temple that sanctified the gold? And whoever swears by the altar, that is nothing, but whoever swears by the offering upon it, he is obligated. You blind men, which is more important, the offering or the altar that sanctifies the offering? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears both by the altar and everything on it. And he who swears by the temple swears both by the temple and by him who dwells within it. And he who swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and him who sits upon it. So he's saying, making an oath is the sin. Jacob, Yaakov, also known as James, to my Gentile friends who are non-Hebrew speaking. James 5:12. But above all, my brethren, do not swear either by heaven or by earth or by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no, so that you may not fall under judgment. Basically, the reason I say this is taking the name of the Lord in vain. God tells us over and over and over again. He said in Vayikra, he said in Bamidbar, make oaths, make vows. If you don't make one, it's okay. I'm not going to fault you for not making an oath or a vow. But I want you to make a vow, and I want you to keep that vow. Why? Because that is using God's name. We are made in God's image. Because we are made in God's image, we have God's name in us. When we break our oath, when we break our vow, we take the name of the Lord in vain. Especially if we say, I swear on my holy mother's, departed mother's grave. That's just stupid. Your mother is just as much a picture of the Messiah as we are. But, hopefully, she was born again. But, if you're going to do something, say you can do it. If you can't do it, say no. Because, people depend on us making oaths. When we don't hold up our end of the oath, then that person will basically end up blaspheming God's name on our account. So that's why he says, that's why all these verses point to taking oaths. When we use God, when we use our identity as believers to say we're going to do something and we don't do it, we have taken God's name in vain, because he tells us when you make an oath, make sure you keep it. So that's that. I'm going to go on because we're almost out of time here. All right, observe the Shabbat is the next one. This is number 4. In Shemot, it says remember. So 14th century rabbi came up with this nice little ditty, and it says, Shamor v'zachor b'dbor echad, observe and remember a single word. What the rabbis say is, Moses' memory isn't bad. It says in the last chapter that his vision did not dim and his vigor did not abate. The man was sharp as a tack, to put it in modern vernacular. And I won't get into the other half of what he was, but his vigor did not abate. He remembered exactly what he heard that day 38 years prior. Shamor and Vizachor. God said both words at the same time. How? I don't know. He's God. He can do whatever he wants. He can break the laws of physics if he wants, and he has. So, go figure. But both words were said by God on Mount Sinai. Observe and remember. So when we remember, when we do the Shabbat, we're looking forward to the kingdom. When we practice the Shabbat, when we practice Sunday, we're not looking forward to anything. Because that's the first day of the week. That's the past. That was the first day of creation, when all was formless and void. God said, observe the Shabbat, remember the Shabbat, the seventh day, which is a picture of the kingdom. And I didn't know why I picked this up, but then now I just realized why. We say this every Shabbat after service. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who set us apart by your established things and took pleasure in us with love and favor, granted us his holy Shabbat as a heritage, a remembrance of the creation. For that day is the first of all the holy rehearsals, a memorial of the exodus from Egypt. For you chose us and set us apart from all the nations, and you gave us your holy Shabbat with love and favor as a heritage. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who sets apart the Shabbat. So that was set up for us to remember creation, but to look forward to the kingdom. And then honor your father and mother. Now, I only have 2 verses here, and they're kind of iffy verses. But what I was looking for was Galatians. Let's go to Galatians real quick. Corinthians, Ephesus, Galatia, chapter 4, verse 26. What does it say? But the Jerusalem above is free. It's talking about the Spirit. Tell me, you who want to be under the Torah, do you not listen to the Torah? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by the bondwoman and one by the free woman. But the son of the bondwoman was born according to the flesh, and the son of the free woman through the promise. This is allegorically speaking. For these women are 2 covenants. One from Mount Sinai, bearing children who are to be slaves. She is Hagar. Now this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. So anybody who thinks it's in the Sinai Peninsula, it's in Arabia, not Sinai Peninsula. That's 2 different countries. And corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free. She is our mother. It's talking about the spiritual Jerusalem. And then in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 2. Now verse 1. Children, listen to your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first mitzvah with a promise, that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth. What I was going to say is, I could have swore there was another verse, but I could not find it, even with the computer, that said the Spirit of God is the mother. In Proverbs, when it talks about wisdom, wisdom is always female, but it also talks about the mother being wise. All the pictures of the Spirit are doves, which are pictured as female animals. The word ruach itself is feminine. I had to laugh. I was reading this book, Recovering the Unity of the Bible, by Dr. Kaiser. the guy's a cool guy, but he's obviously a Christian. He wrote that book in 2009. I think he's kind of changing his tune based on what, after meeting him last at the conference a couple of weeks ago. But he quoted a verse in the New Testament that talks about the Spirit. It's translated as he the Spirit, him the Spirit. I will send him. But I looked up the verbs in, or the words in Greek, and the word for that is translated him actually is a neutered word. It means it has no sex. And the same thing with the word spirit in Hebrew or in Greek. It has no gender to it. But in Hebrew, every word has a gender to it. Ruach is a feminine word. So the Ruach is a picture of the mother. It says in Genesis chapter 2, God created them in His image. In His image He created them male and female. So God the Father and God the Spirit. Honor God the Father and God the Spirit. That's what I'm saying. There's another place that says in the New Testament that talks about Yeshua says a sin against the Ruach is a sin that cannot be forgiven. I believe this is why. This is the mother that God is talking about in the 10 words. All right, so we're almost out of time here. We're almost done. I know I got 2 more slides, so I'm just going to go through them quickly. It's the 10 words. We all know the 10 words. Short comment. In my Bible, verse 17, you shall not murder. You shall not. Verse 18, you shall not commit adultery. Verse 19, you shall not steal. Verse 20, you shall not bear false witness. These are all the same verse in Hebrew. So if you pick up a Tanakh, what is verse 21 in the English Bible is verse 17, 18 in the Jewish Bible. So, no murder. Murder is different from killing. There are 11 words for killing, slaying, slaughtering, murder. Both times in Shemot and in Devarim, it uses the word ratzach, to slay or to kill. I believe it's actually the same word used in verse 42 of chapter 4, where it talks about unintentionally killing his neighbor. Kill 2/3 of them right there and let a third go. So to say killing is wrong is wrong. Don't murder. Don't kill with hatred in your heart towards that person. That's what he was saying in chapter 4. He does it unintentionally with no hatred in his heart, without having hatred toward him in time past. So that's the difference between murder and to kill, is that hatred, that anger, that rage that makes us want to kill. So no adultery. self-explanatory. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness. All right. I'm not going to get into them. The second set up there is Melchim Aleph, which is 1 Kings in English. Basically, every single one of these pictures is somebody telling a lie. The Torah doesn't say don't lie. It says don't bear false witness. God uses lies all the time. God is truth, yes, but he uses lies to get people to do what he needs them to do. Shemot is the two midwives. Most people won't go so far as to say that, oh, they lied. It's like, they'll say, oh, they feared God more than they feared Pharaoh. True, but did they not tell the truth? By the time we get there, the women have already given birth and we don't know what it is. That was a lie. Melchim Aleph and Divrei Bet, Divrei 2, is the same story. It's my favorite prophet. What's his name? Not Malachi, but I can't remember. I'm blanking out on his name. But the king of Israel and the king of Judah call him and say, shall we go up to war? And he's like, oh yeah, go ahead. God's given you favor, no problem. Yep, go. Because the guard told him when he brought him in, look, all the prophets are favorable for this war. They want to go to war. So, make sure your word, and he's like, I can only speak what God tells me. So he walks in, and so what do you say? Let's look at his name. First Kings. Micaiah, that's it. Micaiah predicts defeat. He's talking about Ahav and Josiah, I believe. Yehoshaphat. So he walks in and he says, all right, Micaiah, what's the verdict? What does God say? He's like, yeah, go ahead. Knock yourself out. You're going to... Good job, man. You're going to go kill them all. Let God sort them out. And the king's God is like, how many times do I have to tell you, tell me the truth? He's like, fine, if you want me to tell you the truth, this is the truth. I saw God sitting on his throne, and he said, who will entice him to go to war? And one of the spirits stood up and said, I will put a deceiving spirit I will put a lying spirit in his prophets. And God says, go, make it so. So that this man is destroyed. He's killed because of the sins he did to other people. The last one, John 7, Yochanan chapter 7, is Yeshua. They're getting ready to go up to Sukkot, one of 3 feasts that every male is required. And his brothers are saying, all right, Yeshua, you're going to go up to the feast. We're going to go crown you king, man. Come on. It's Sukkot. It's time to crown the king. Let's go crown you. And he's like, yeah, I'll go. I'm going to stick around here in Galil for a while. I'm not going to go this year. Y'all knock yourself out. I'm going to hang around here with my friends. We're going to hang out up here. I'm not going to go. He's required to go. The Torah walking around flesh is not going to not go to Jerusalem for Sukkot, because it says in the Torah, you shall go. So anybody who says, well, he really didn't say that, it's like, look, I don't care how many times you twist it. He says, it's not my time, I'm not going to go. And it also says, because he knew they wanted to crown him king, and it wasn't his time to be crowned king yet. That's not coming for another 2,000 years. So he says, yeah, I'll go. He lied through his teeth. He didn't bear false witness, though. And that's the important thing. He didn't say, he did it. He's the guilty one, even though he wasn't guilty. That happens throughout the scriptures, and what happens? God disciplines them. There's all sorts of people who tell falsehoods in order for God to get somebody to do something he wants them to do. And that's okay. But you got to know, again, like killing, you've got to know it's God's desire. You've got to know with all your heart that it's the right thing to do. Because we as humans, our emotions and our feelings get wrapped up into these things, and now it's no longer God's picture, it's our little war thing. So we've got to be careful with that. But false witness is not lying. It's per se, I mean, it's lying, but it's not lying to get God's objective done. It's lying to hurt somebody else. All of these last 6 deal with hurting somebody else based on your feelings, on selfishness. And the last ones, don't covet. I want this, I want that. Like, yeah, all right, God, this is what I need. This is how I try to avoid that. Okay, God, this is what I need. I can't afford it. I know I can't afford it. I'd like to have it, but,